employees and employees of KCC and employees of Thanet Council, but no one else, so that's quite an enclosed group. How many of you were here last Saturday when they had the meeting? Yes, right. And you will have noticed there were a lot of knowledgeable people in the audience, not employees aware, but very interesting and useful suggestions to make. And I think a working group like that should be continued in some form. Now, at the moment, my organisation's only got 400 supporters. We try to send out regular emails to them with any news that exists. Your petition has got 13,500 signatures, I think it is, and it does give out information, but the real difficulty seems to be that you're searching through so many comments from thousands of people, or hundreds of people, that it's quite difficult to pick out, when this meeting today was at 10 o'clock. In fact, we found it once, then we couldn't find it again, but we thought it said 10 o'clock. It would be useful to have some sort of source to which everyone could go, so for the latest news on Manston, they could hear from one of us. Keith, have you got any suggestion on this?
Yeah, I think certainly, the Police Society was set up by Dan Knight as the chairman a couple of weeks ago, and never his wildest dreams to imagine we'd have so much support. He just sort of among a few interested people. He, like the rest of you, is one person who's sort of enough is enough, I'm going to do something. I'll try it and see what happens. So it's learning curves for all of us, really. We've got 5 administrators on the site, which are constantly scanning through the comments. Picking out the comments which we think are good and which are viable and make a good argument, because the one thing we've got to do is we've got to make sure that if Manston is going to continue, it's not the numbers, it's the weight of argument. And that is the only way that you're going to succeed with this. Manston has a perfectly good weight of argument. Everyone on that site has donated something and put something in and said, here's some ideas. With all of the comments put together off the Facebook sites and obviously from the Sheffield site as well, there is a viable business plan, and that is just from members of the public. What we've got to do is we've got to start, saying to politicians, stop ignoring what is right under your nose. We have Manston Airport, which is a viable option for taking cargo away from Heathrow and Gatwick. You don't need an extra runway in Heathrow or Gatwick. You've got a runway here with warehousing, with staff. All you need is a couple of extra depots, a couple of extra warehouses. You have got an international freight centre right here, right in Kent with infrastructure. And that is what we've got to concentrate on. That in itself is a good enough argument to outweigh numbers or to get over the weight of argument and to get over any planning development ideas. I think that we should work together, and I think that the public should be involved in saving Manston, which is why I think the idea of going forward to Thanet District Council and the MPs and saying we want a subcommittee made up of members of the public which will feed back the information to the MPs via the subcommittee to say this is what we want. We need a bit of power up there and we need to get heard, and that's the only way. Shouting and arguing and turning up and doing right is not the way to talk to these people. You've got to wear a suit, you've got to talk their language, and that's the only way forward. Join forces and do it. I think that's the way forward.
Yeah, definitely.
At the moment we have got an email service to all our supporters, which is free. But I mean, all is not over. I mean, there are various pluses. Don't forget, and it hasn't been publicised. There's lots of things that people don't generally know. It was said on one news item, but it's correct, that the offer that was made to Mrs. Globe was £8 million. So someone was willing to offer £8 million, and she turned it down. No, well, when she paid £1, plus the odd third of a million or whatever. But she has got a personal fortune of 600 million. And the danger with that is she could say, if there's trouble here, well, I'll just leave it for 20 years and close it down and so on. That's the real danger. So that's why we've got to be positive. But there are other people around who might make a bid. There are other developments around like this, seeing whether covenants are actually going to make it very difficult to do anything other than aviation on this site. Well, it's got all the pluses. I mean, I like to think the most obvious one is that for anyone in East Kent, until now, if you wanted to fly off to the continent, you could be from your home to the airport was 30 minutes, you would wait 30 minutes here, you would be on the continent another 30 minutes, an hour and a half from leaving home to being on the continent. That's what Manston offered. What we've now all got is 3 hours on the motorway and having to set off half the time at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then 3 hours compulsory wait in Heathrow or Gatwick. So it's 6 hours before you even get off the ground. That's the alternative. And double the car parking. There's so many pluses that Manston's got. So I really think, yes, if we can have as you say, perhaps a group coordinated by Thanet Council, which will also bring home to Thanet Council that one has to say it, the no-night flights people are a minority, and the majority think it's far more important to get Manston getting up, working properly, and telling people what's happening as well.
Well, have we got any legal beagles on our side who are actually digging into it?
Jeffrey is on our committee, is a retired solicitor.
Excellent.
He's
Hello, Jeffrey.
Yes, he's one. And other than that, I mean, there are other people around. There's a gentleman who was there last Saturday who's investigating. I think he may think he has one of these covenants for when his grandparents sold us part of the site to Manston Airport. But he's also inquiring around. And again, if we've got all these thousands of people who see the notifications on your site, but if also we can tell our supporters, and if we get do take a card from me if you want to get regular email updates on news and important articles in the papers that you may have missed and things like that. We try to put every important development on our website for the supporters.
Have you organised a fund, an action fund?
Well, I have to say we've got very little money at the moment, just a couple of £100. It would be very useful to have more. Yeah. I mean, I give the simple example of when we had a stand last year at Thanet at War. It cost, was it £40 for the stand and £50 for the insurance, or we couldn't have a stand. So that's £90 straight off just to have a stand, and then you get volunteers to
maybe
run.
on your site you could set something up where people could pay over PayPal.
I think they can pay by PayPal at the moment, yes. But anyway, we can easily fix that. Any suggestion like that is welcome.
I think a hitman's about 5,000. So that under 5,000 is the porridge afterwards.
That's the gentleman who's investigating these covenants, but it's all in action.
Oh, good.
Yes.
Question for you. I'm a trustee at the Spitfire Museum. You're talking about working with people at the council. What exactly do you mean there?
Well, Laura Sands, this is all I've heard of it. I've been waiting to hear about this working party. She said this morning that they have set up the working party. That's her and Roger Gale, a working party of them and members, I think, staff from KCC and staff from Thanet Council.
So we're talking officers from KCC?
Officers, that's right, officers from the church. I don't think councillors, not the active, no, nothing like that. Well, as far as I know, unless she can, again, we haven't seen any transfer, this is simply verbal information.
Well, the more names we've got, the more we can lobby them.
Well, perhaps we ought to hold Laura and Roger to account and ask them for names. And, you know,
right, yes.
Then we can start lobbying these people.
Yeah, and we can always suggest other useful names they might consider, and even perhaps really knowledgeable people who aren't officers of one of those two councils, which is all it is at the moment, or indeed knowledgeable councillors.
Organise a boycott stagecoach for one day.
That's a good idea.
If you did that, everybody, just one day, if you don't want to put these guys' drivers like their licences and their futures, but if you said, right, one day, everybody, if you can, not everybody can, boycott stagecoach. I tell you what,
it's a very good idea. And it will make an impact.
That will be all the people down here, empty buses.
I mean, one of the problems that Manston still has is it's known as a regional airport, and it's therefore only on regional news, and we've never had national news down here. A boycott of stagecoach for the whole of Kent might be much more effective. And it's
coverage with your side petition.
I've lost ABC, and what they've done is they've passed it to the London News team. Basically what happens is BBC South East work with the London teams, and whatever London teams think is applicable to Londoners, they will filter down from BBC South East. And I basically said to them in an email, look, this does affect Londoners, because more air traffic for an extra runway is going to upset an awful lot of Londoners. It will affect them. It means coverage, so they're going to work with the London News team and try and.
There seems
to
be a general political.
Well, just on that point, I was duty manager with EU Jet, and a lot of our passengers come from South London. From South London to here
it's easier.
Just as quick as going to go. So we had a tremendous amount of people from the Greenwich
Alton, that sort of area in southeast London, which is a large area, we're using, you know, our flights quite regularly.
Yes, South East London, again, it's nearer to South East London.
And I said to him, look, what would you rather do? Would you rather spend an hour and a half travelling through Feltham looking at concrete buildings and a jungle and graffiti, or would you want to spend half an hour travelling through the Garden of England looking at the beautiful countryside to get to an airport for a nice relaxed, you know, departure and off and away you go? And what better way to leave the country than through Kent and arrive back into it?
On a political station, on a political what worries me?
Sorry, yes, you were saying,
Sorry, what worries me on a political level is that all the parties seem to have this view that this is not on the government's agenda, it's end of, and they're not prepared to kind of bring it in and start fighting. That's the point which you do step in, and you know, the local political parties, well, it's not on the government's agenda, it's not in the plan, well, we've got to make it part of it, we've got to lobby.
I think Laura and Roger did brought it up in Parliament, haven't they, last week? And they spoke to the Transport Minister and the Aviation Minister about it, so we don't know what's going on there.
But Roger did make a point last week that it is not on the government's plan.
Oh no, it's not.
You know, the government aren't interested.
We've got an election coming up in 2015.
Yeah.
Well, the huge government were funding certain airfields, or giving them a certain amount of budget to stay open. Why hasn't Manston been closed?
Without batting an eyelid, won't they? You know.
Sorry, you were going to say?
As if this could be a little gold mine.
Yes, it could be. Yes, it could be. Yes.
Make them pro Manston. They don't want extensions at Heathrow, they don't want extensions at Gatwick.
Same with the people up the Medway as well. They don't want the airport built out the foggy estuary.
They're all
North Coast of Kent, it's taking the right step out.
Can I just say what I think you're suggesting is that we actually contact the people who are against the expansion of Gatwick, Heathrow, and get them on the side of Manston.
I've approached them on the website. I've actually approached them and said to them, look, you know, I think you guys should stick your nose and have a look at this. I think they accepted the request.
If you make these people available, we can all pester them.
And even the locals at Leeds. There's a lot of people at Leeds around the area who don't want the expansion.
Then we get the national publicity because if the Heathrow, anti-Heathrow people and so on are all busy supporting us. That makes it national.
I think that Lid Airport and Manston can work side by side to take a lot of the freight and cargo out of Heathrow and also increase passenger. I don't see, you know, okay, Lid wants the extension, but I think that both the airports could run in the South East and take a lot of freight out of central London and reduce a lot of air conditioning over London. It's a worrying thing, you know, they're trying to put more flights in. At some point, something's going to happen, and this is right over a very dense population. We don't really want that. You know, I'm not saying that anywhere is good, but in such, you know, when you've got aircraft landing every 20 seconds at Heathrow or Gatwick and taking off, that's an awful lot. At some point, that's an awful lot of juggling to do. You've got an extra runway into that equation.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, you notice that about a year ago there was a Heathrow flight that set off and was going down and came down to the Thames estuary, and they'd left the flaps on the wings open, so they knew there was something seriously wrong. So rather than landing at Manston or Southend or somewhere nearby, Heathrow told them to fly all the way back to Heathrow in this unknown situation where they might have crashed at any point, right in the centre of London. Thank goodness they survived to get back to Heathrow. But
There was a plane diverted here the other day, wasn't there?
Yes, it was diverted here because it had engine trouble. That's right.
Heathrow was faulted.
That's another point. Manston hardly ever gets any fault. So there are so many pluses for Manston.
Well, that's exactly. If it's good enough for the Queen, where are they going to divert those games? And
Listen, I was speaking with a guy called Joseph Hyatt. Now, I don't know if you guys know him.
Sorry, can we have a hush, please, because Pete's telling us something.
I was speaking with a guy called Joseph Hyatt. Now, Joseph Hyatt was, I don't know if you remember, he'd been on the Dragon's Den a few years ago. Now, he's a bit of a business entrepreneur. And when I sat down and spoke to him 3 or 4 days ago, he put across a very good role model for running Manston, which is running smaller 19-seat aircraft, leased aircraft, to Amsterdam, places like that, dealing with some of the not so well-known destinations, and running at a profit. By running smaller aircraft, they're quieter, they're more efficient, you can increase your profit margin, instead of running larger aircraft that are only, you know, maybe 50% capacity some of the time. The other thing you can do is, you know, obviously increase the fleet. I mean, he had so many good ideas. He's willing to support Manston and back it. One of the things I suggested to him, well, would you be prepared to work with a consortium of 2 other groups? You know, obviously putting Manston out there and actually getting the public to buy shares in Manston, so the public and the staff are actually part of the ownership of Manston. The first time I was saying that in the UK has been done, and I think that, you know, as I said to him, you know, we've got pubs that are closing down left, right and centre. Villages are taking over pubs and turning them from, you know, derelict buildings into successful business plans. Why can Manston not be done the same way on the same business model?
Yeah.
Well, couldn't we invite him to come to a public meeting organised by the
Absolutely, he's more
tours,
willing to do
explain
that.
his ideas to
Can
us?
I
and
just
again-
say one thing about passionate numbers? Just quickly, this is one thing. Now, when the EUJet came into Manston, they were, prior to coming to Manston, they were what we call a wet lease airline, ACNI. They flew for other airlines when